Hey everyone! Well, as promised, as threatened for quite some time now, we are finally launching Risk and Rebels. Yay! Thank you for tuning in to the inaugural episode. What is Risk and Rebels, you ask? Why should you care? Why does it exist? This is my attempt at a podcast, and it is funny because if you'd asked me 5, maybe even 2 years ago whether I'd ever start a podcast, I would have laughed. I just thought, no, that's not my skill set. I hate hearing recordings of my own voice. Also, does the world really need another podcast? Took a little time to get me here, but we're here now, and I'm excited, and I ask for your patience while I am going through the learning process with this. I have some extraordinary mentors and inspiration in this industry who told me, just get out there and do it. Doesn't matter if it's good or great, just start producing content and being consistent. So all that is to say, I am very open to feedback. Really looking forward to getting this off the ground. We have some really exciting guests coming up over the next few episodes. And look, there's already plenty of smart people talking about AI, compliance, fintech, startups, whatever it is you're interested in. Somebody already has a microphone and an opinion. I am not looking to create another place just where people sound smart. I want to create a place where people sound honest. That is something that has been really dear to me throughout the course of my entire career. And those of you who have had the pleasure or misfortune, depending on your point of view, of hearing me speak, know that I'm not afraid to get honest. I'm really not afraid to get down into the weeds on things. The conversations I've had over the last, I won't even say how many years I've been in industry, the best ones, the ones where I really learned the most, they didn't happen on stage. They didn't happen while I was listening to people speak. And it's not to say that I didn't learn anything, of course. Of course, I've learned wonderful things over the years. But the best, the most honest conversations where you really learn stuff that you need to know, they happen after the fact. When panels are over, everyone's heading to the happy hour, no one's recording, and everything's off the record at that point. And that's when we really start getting honest. And those are the conversations I really remember. Not, in small part because of gossip, which can be fun, but because they're real. I really appreciate when I meet fellow founders who admit when they almost made the wrong call or made a mistake, or executives who've told me about decisions that still haunt them years later. And at lunchtime at panels and conferences, we have regulators explaining what things look like from their side of the table, which we're always hungry for those kinds of conversations. I really respect and appreciate when people stop trying to sound impressive and start actually trying to make sense of what's happening. Like, those are my favorite kinds of conversations. And that's the kind of podcast I would want to listen to. I figured maybe I should stop waiting for somebody else to do it and do it myself. So people, when they introduce me, will usually introduce me as a lawyer or a chief compliance officer or someone who works in fintech or AI. All of that's true. But after this many years in industry, that's not really how I'm thinking about my career so much anymore. When I look back over the past X number of years, I don't remember all of the regulations, but I do remember the decisions. I remember sitting in conference rooms where people agreed on facts but disagreed on what to do next. I remember conversations with founders trying to decide whether to launch, what to launch, looking for my opinion on go-to-market, which is, why you hire wonderful people out there that have those skills. I'm just here to opine on the risks and controls. But all of the conversations, everything, all the good, all the bad, all the ugly, it's all taught me something. And insofar as I have skills and stories to share, that's something that I'm really excited to talk more about. Every horrible job I've had, every really tough boss or CEO that I've worked with, even in the moment, if it felt, miserable or like a nightmare, I've always been grateful in a non-sarcastic way for the experience, because that's life. We're never going to work in a perfect environment where everybody is as nice as we would like them to be. So figuring out how to roll with the punches, how to deal with tough personalities, how to still do the best job you possibly can, show up and do that every day. I'm grateful for all of it. I'm grateful for the nightmare I went through at HSBC. Although at the time, if you asked me if I was grateful for it, I certainly would have said no. I'm grateful for Binance. Those of you who have heard my talk at ACAMS, heard me be very candid. I'm grateful for all of it. Everybody's out there trying to do the best they can with the tools that they have. I've had friends who are psychologists always say, you're doing your best, but you can do better. And that's something that I get up and I think about every single day. When it comes to compliance, which has been my industry for the past 15 years. One question that's come up repeatedly, no matter what situation I've been in, has been, what do you think we should do? And it's such a deceptively simple question, because by the time someone asks it, the easy part is really over, because we're moving away from a time period where just reading regulations and guidance and FATF and what's going on in the EU and Singapore and Asia and hearing people's thoughts on the regs. There's so much information out there. We can all read it. We can all digest it. Really awesome and smart people are posting about it on LinkedIn or in Telegram chats. But to me, that's the easy part. But then it starts getting difficult when we're talking about human judgment. And this is the part of anything in life that I find fascinating. Once we start bringing judgment and motivation and human psychology into everything, you can start figuring out why certain decisions have been made, even if you don't agree with them. You can understand why people made certain trade-offs, if you're understanding incentives, if you're getting comfortable with how much uncertainty you're willing to live with. This is where we start to really get into the meat and potatoes of everything. Whether you're building a business, whether you're in compliance, risk, and governance, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a venture capitalist, knowing the psychology, the motivation, incentives, understanding that judgment is really key here is just so critical, because nobody has perfect information. Not the regulators, not the consultants, and certainly not the people who sound the most confident in the room. I can't even tell you how many times I've had people say to me, oh, this person sounds like they know what they're talking about. And I think, yeah, they definitely do, but at the end of the day, they don't. But experience doesn't always give you certainty. What it does is it gives you better questions. I remember learning that in law school. It's not that you're necessarily, when you're asking questions, going to find the answers. You're going to learn how to ask better questions to try to get bits and pieces of the information you're looking for. So in my field, the question is not, and I would tell a client, can you do this? Can we do this? We start asking, should you do this? What are we missing? How do we control for the things that you want to do? Who's actually missing from the conversation? That seems deceptively simple as well, but that's something I always ask in founder meetings is, who isn't in this meeting? Who should be? Spoiler alert, a lot of the time it's legal. Those are the questions, the uncomfortable questions that really need to be asked. And what I try to do in my work is move away from doing things just because they're comfortable into doing things because they're the right thing to do, which is super subjective. But as I've posted about in LinkedIn or had conversations with people about, hearing this is how we've always done it is not a great business decision for moving forward with why you'll continue to do things. This is why this podcast exists, for anybody asking good questions. Not because I think I have the answers. Maybe I have some. I definitely don't have a lot of them. What I do have is a front row seat to some incredibly thoughtful people in this industry and multiple industries making really difficult decisions. Sometimes they get it right, sometimes they don't. But as I've said before, I've learned from every single one of them, and I'm really hoping that you will too. If you've ever been a person who had to make the call when there wasn't an obvious right answer, or if you've ever wondered why incredibly smart people could look at the same set of facts and reach completely different conclusions, you are in the right place, because that is what Risk and Rebels is really about. We're not here for rules, we're not here for headlines. We've got some hot takes, but we're coming in with judgment and why it matters more than ever. So what happens from here? Well, honestly, I'm not completely sure, and I mean that in the best possible way. I know the kinds of conversations I want to have. I just don't know exactly where they're going to end up. When I was doing some deep dive interviews for my newsletter, I would send a script out to the people I was interviewing, and 9 times out of 10, we would go off the rails. And I don't want to make this an hour-long podcast. I don't want to listen to an hour-long podcast on almost anything. So we're going to try to keep this short, sweet, to the point, really interesting bullets that you can listen to on a break and really come away from, think, wow, in that 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes tops, I promise, I really learned something. It's not going to be from a script. It's going to be from my guests and I really honing in on what matters, what do we find interesting. Somebody says something that completely changes how you think about a problem, or you realize you've been asking the wrong question the whole time. That will make all of this worth it to me. Those are my favorite kinds of moments, and that's what I'm chasing with this podcast. If you're expecting or thinking every episode is going to be about compliance, hate to tell you, I'm going to disappoint you. Sure, we'll talk about compliance, we'll talk about regulations, we'll talk about AI and banking and all the things I've spent my career around. But those are the settings, really. They're not the story. The story is always the people. Founders who bet everything on an idea everyone else thought was crazy, and maybe it was crazy, and it tanked. Regulators trying to write rules for technology that didn't exist 5 years ago. Everyone's head is spinning when it comes to AI at the moment. I'm struggling to keep up. The conversations I think I'm going to have when I get asked to speak are definitively not the conversations that I end up having. We're going to have some journalists on the show who have spent months following trails everyone else missed. Got some really cool stuff there. And certainly I will feature compliance folks and compliance officers who are trying to do the right thing while the rest of the company is moving 100 miles an hour. And we're going to get into the stories. There's plenty of podcasts and materials out there dissecting regulations and statistics and compliance KPIs. I'm not only going to have chief compliance officers on here. I'm going to have people who've maybe only been in the States for a year and are really trying to make a go of it. Trying to get a friend of mine at Homeland Security to come on and talk about why law enforcement wants so badly to talk to operators. It's not because you're in trouble, it's just they really want to work together. I've got an investigative journalist lined up, former regulators who've got some interesting takes on what's happening in the space, people who are incredibly smart, people who are really trying to think through problems, people who are thoughtful, have changed their minds, built something, failed. The common denominator ultimately is that everyone comes in vulnerable and ready to share their story. That's, at the end of the day, what people are always drawn to are the stories. Some people that are going to be on the show, I've known them for years. Some of them I've only recently met, but everyone's got a pretty cool story. And a few of them are going to have opinions that are going to make me uncomfortable, might make you uncomfortable. And what do I have to say to that? Good. I don't want this podcast to be a place where everyone politely agrees with each other for 45 minutes. We've got enough of that. I want real disagreement. I want some sparks flying. It's okay to have a little bit of cussing in this show. I think I read somewhere that people that curse or have higher IQs or something, maybe we'll test that out. I want this show to be the kind where two smart people can see the same facts, argue their positions, walk away maybe not agreeing with the other one, but respecting each other a little bit more, because I think we're losing that in a lot of places. And maybe this can be a small space where we bring some of that back in this industry. I want to create a space for ideas that don't necessarily fit into social media. I love writing on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually a really cool place. There's a lot of garbage out there. There's a lot of posts on B2B sales and how it relates to somebody's honeymoon or whatever, and I just breeze right past those. But there are some really incredible people who've started conversations I never expected and have honestly played a huge role in where my business is today. I remember attending a consortium meeting last year of compliance officers where we were talking about LinkedIn, and somebody had a great question. They said, has anybody gotten business through posting on LinkedIn? For me personally, have I had somebody DM me on LinkedIn and say, I saw your really cool post and I want to hire you? No. Have I had people who came across RayCor in some form or fashion reach out and say, I found your website and your LinkedIn and I'd like to have a conversation with you. The fact that you have a real web presence and you put content out there makes me interested in wanting to talk to you? Yes. Have I had people, founders, reg tech people wanting advice and wanting to ask me questions reach out to me? Yes. Has building the relationships with some people that I've met that I would not have met but for LinkedIn led to business? 100% absolutely. When I started this business 4 years ago, I was talking to some women from the Association for Women in Cryptocurrency. asking for advice about building a business. And I had this post-it note taped to my wall for years. This woman said, build relationships and the business will come. Business didn't come immediately overnight just from attending one conference. It came from being consistent, showing up, making connections, and making time for people. The problem with LinkedIn is every time I hit post on a post, I feel like I'm kind of cutting the thought in half because there's always another question or another layer or another story that didn't make it because nobody wants to read a 4,000 word LinkedIn post, and I totally don't blame them. Maybe you do. Sometimes they can be interesting, but most people don't. So if you've been a subscriber to the RayCor newsletter, alongside the podcast, the newsletter is getting a rebrand and an update. They're going to be companion pieces. The podcast is the conversation, and the newsletter is what happens after I've had a little bit more time to think. Both will be called Risk and Rebels. Sometimes the newsletter will expand on something a guest said. Sometimes it'll be something I can't stop thinking about after a client meeting, something really gets stuck in my craw, or maybe it's a book I just finished. And sometimes it might be challenging something I said on the podcast the week before. I am the first person to admit when I've made a mistake, and I'm always here to correct that. I'm okay with that because changing your mind, I don't believe is weakness. It's evidence that you're learning and growing, and that's what I really hope for all of us. And that's what I hope that this becomes, a place where people who are naturally curious can spend a little bit of time together every week, talking about difficult decisions without pretending they're easy. We can disagree without turning each other into villains, and we can admit that sometimes the most honest answer is, I don't know, or I don't know yet, because you can look up the answer. If you've ever been in one of those, Money 2020 or other type conference hallway conversations where you suddenly realize you're learning more in 15 minutes than you did during the event, that's the feeling I'm trying to recreate here. So seriously, thank you for tuning in. There are a lot of podcasts you could have clicked on today, and the fact that you spent a little bit of time with me means more than you probably realize. I really am hoping you'll come back, and I'm really hoping you'll challenge me. I'm hoping you'll send me your ideas, people I should talk to, questions we should explore, and certainly tell me where you think I've gotten something wrong, because that's how better thinking happens. And if there's one thing I hope you take away from Risk and Rebels, it's this. The goal is to keep asking better questions. I'm Christina Rea. Thanks for listening. Until next time, question the assumptions, understand the incentives, and remember that the most important decisions you'll ever make usually happen after the rules stop giving you the answer. See you next time.